Have you ever witnessed something so chilling, so inexplicable, that it made you question everything you thought you knew? Imagine being in a delivery room, expecting a routine birth, only to have the very laws of medicine and nature defy you. What if the whispers of a mother in labor weren't just from her? What if they were coming from somewhere else? Stay with me, because this is the story of a case that still haunts me to this day. I've been an OB/GYN for over 15 years, seen it all joy, sorrow, and everything in between. But one night, I faced something I can't explain, something that still clings to me even now, years later. It was a regular Friday shift at Mercy General. The air was thick with the usual hospital hum, that blend of whispers, footsteps, and distant beeping. I had just finished a long round of checking up on my patients when the call came in. A woman, pregnant, rushed in, her husband at her side, frantic. No signs of trauma, just an unsettling feeling that hung in the room the moment I stepped in. Her name was Emily. She was in her 3rd trimester, a first-time mother. She looked off. Her skin was pale, almost ghostly, and her eyes were wide, too wide, not in pain, but in fear. A fear that no one had spoken yet, but was obvious to anyone who looked. I did what I always do, checked vitals, confirmed the fetal heart tones. But the moment I attached the monitor to her stomach, something didn't feel right. The baby's heart rate was erratic, spiking and then plummeting, out of rhythm with the contractions. It wasn't normal. I adjusted the monitor, tapped it, and it was still there, the strange dips. As if the baby was responding to something beyond the womb. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked, my voice calm, professional. She barely blinked before whispering, "I hear her calling." I froze. "Who?" "The baby." I hear her calling. I couldn't explain it, but the air in the room thickened. Her husband, pale and sweating, stepped forward. "She's not well," he said, his voice breaking. "She keeps saying she hears the baby's name. She's never told anyone that name, not even me." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I tried to dismiss it, tried to chalk it up to stress, to hormones, but I could feel it in my bones. Something was terribly wrong. I moved her to a room, away from the crowded triage, away from the chaos of the ER. Everything was routine on paper, but the chill that settled in my chest was anything but. The room was dim, just the faint glow of the monitors and soft fluorescent lights above. Emily lay there, her hand clutching her husband's. The beeping of the fetal monitor was constant, steady, but her face remained blank, detached. It wasn't right. "Emily, focus on me," I said softly, placing a hand on her arm. "Is the baby moving?" She nodded, but didn't speak, just stared at the ceiling, her lips moving slowly. I thought she was speaking to her husband, but when I leaned in, I realized she wasn't. She was whispering a name no one had ever heard it before. I had no idea where it came from, but it chilled me to the bone. The fetal heart tones flatlined, just like that. The steady rhythm disappeared, replaced by silence. I moved quickly, checking the monitor. Panic bubbled in my chest. But before I could react, the monitor clicked back on. The baby's heart rate was now a steady 120 BPM, as if nothing had happened. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered again. "She's here." I couldn't even process what she was saying. Was this a hallucination? Stress-induced? But I had never seen anything like this in my career, and I've seen some pretty high-risk cases. Her husband leaned in, holding her hand tightly. "What's happening to her, Angie? What is this?" I shook my head. I had no answer. As I documented the event in her chart, something tugged at me, something I couldn't ignore. Every part of me said to continue, to follow protocol, but something deeper told me that this case wasn't just medical, it was something else. The rest of the night was a blur of tests, checks, and vague reassurances. Emily's condition was stable. The baby's heart rate continued to fluctuate strangely, responding to her whispers, responding to something else. It was as if the entire room held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Just before shift change, I sat down to review the case. I felt a deep sense of unease that I couldn't shake. Something about Emily, about the baby, was outside the realm of what I knew. Something inexplicable, something unnatural. I knew I had to leave for the night, but a part of me couldn't. A part of me wanted to know what was really happening. And then, Emily whispered again. "She's coming." That was when everything changed. I tried to push the unease aside. In obstetrics, things change quickly. The unknowns, the shifts in rhythm, the sudden moments of tension, they come with the territory. But that night, nothing felt routine. As Emily's contractions grew more intense, her whispers grew louder, more deliberate. I glanced at her husband, his face a mask of confusion and fear, but his eyes were filled with something else now, desperation. "Angie," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She keeps saying the same name, the baby. She's calling her by name, Angie. What does it mean? I didn't answer him. I didn't know what to say. I had worked with thousands of women in labor, and I'd never encountered anything like this, not even close. The fetal heart tones fluctuated erratically again, dipping lower and lower until the monitor flatlined once more. My heart pounded as I grabbed for the Doppler, trying to hear the baby's heartbeat manually. My fingers shook as I pressed it against Emily's abdomen. There was nothing, just silence. Then, in an instant, the monitor snapped back to life, the baby's heart racing, faster than I'd ever heard, as though it was struggling, or even trying to escape. Emily, her eyes wide, stared at the corner of the room. Her lips moved again, whispering that same name, the one I had never heard, the one I couldn't shake. And then, something strange happened. The baby's heart rate steadied. Her name's Emily, she whispered, her voice calm, almost too calm. She's here. She says she's waiting for you. I tried to focus, to remind myself that this was just stress, that maybe Emily was hallucinating. But everything in my experience told me that wasn't the case. The baby's heart rate wasn't just fluctuating from stress, it was responding to Emily, responding to her whispers. A feeling of cold dread washed over me. I wanted to look away, to dismiss it all as an anomaly, but my body refused to obey. Something was off. My gut told me that this wasn't just a bad case. It was a moment that defied every principle I had ever learned. Suddenly, Emily gasped. Her body jolted upright, and her eyes locked onto mine, no longer fearful, but unnervingly calm. She says, "You need to leave. She doesn't want you here." The words froze me in place. I couldn't understand them, but my instincts screamed at me that I needed to leave the room. And yet, something held me there. Something was keeping me in her presence, in that room. "Angie, please, what's happening?" Aaron's voice trembled, but he didn't move toward his wife. He looked terrified, as if he were caught between the reality of his wife's condition and the growing terror that seemed to surround them both. The fetal heart rate spiked again, as if in response to Emily's words. It wasn't the regular pattern anymore. It was erratic, like something was reaching out from beyond the room. I couldn't explain it. I didn't know how to explain it. Then the lights flickered, and for a brief moment, everything in the room felt like it was underwater. The air was thick, heavy. I could feel my pulse quicken, but the machine, the monitors, everything seemed to be reacting to something I couldn't see. The sound of the heart monitor, the voices, even the breathing in the room, it all felt muffled. Emily's lips moved again, but this time, her words were louder, clearer. "It's time." The atmosphere in the room shifted once more. It wasn't the pain of labor anymore. It wasn't the medical struggle I knew so well. It was something else, something intangible. The contraction came in waves, but the baby's heart rate, for the first time all night, didn't respond as expected. The pattern, the fluctuations, were all out of sync. It was as though the baby wasn't responding to the labor at all. It was responding to something else in the room, something unseen. I reached for the emergency call button, but as my fingers hovered over it, I heard Emily's voice again, calm and steady. "Please don't call anyone. She says it's not time yet." I looked at her, and for a moment, I didn't see the patient anymore. I didn't see the woman in labor. I saw someone else, something else. Her eyes, distant and yet focused, stared beyond me, beyond the room, beyond the hospital. And in that moment, I realized Emily wasn't just in labor. She was waiting for something. She was waiting for the moment to come. The baby wasn't the only one being delivered. There was something else in that room with us. The contraction intensified again. Emily's body arched, and for a moment, it looked like the labor was taking over. But her eyes didn't reflect the struggle of childbirth. They were still locked on that corner of the room, staring into the nothingness that only she seemed to see. I caught myself looking at the corner, half expecting to see something, but there was nothing there. No shadow, no figure, just the soft flickering of the overhead lights. But it didn't matter what I saw. It was what Emily saw that was starting to consume me. Her breathing was calm, steady, like someone listening to instructions. It wasn't the frantic, desperate breaths I was used to hearing from mothers in labor. It was as though she were receiving directions from a source that was human. Every breath, every exhale was perfectly timed with the baby's heart rate spikes and drops. The monitor was no longer a tool of measurement. It had become an instrument responding to her, responding to something I couldn't grasp. "Please, please don't let her go with it," Aaron whispered, his voice hoarse, trembling. His eyes never left his wife's face, but he couldn't bring himself to move any closer. He looked lost, caught between his love for Emily and his fear of what was happening to her. I tried to focus on the task at hand. I adjusted the fetal heart monitor, repositioning the leads. But the baby's heart rate continued to fluctuate unpredictably, as if in direct response to Emily's every word, every whispered name. I felt the tension building in my chest. The usual calm that comes with routine practice was replaced by something darker, more suffocating. The room felt too small, too confined, as though the walls were closing in on us. And then came the sound, the same sound I'd heard countless times before, but this time, it was different. A low hum. It wasn't coming from the baby or from any of the equipment. It was coming from the air, filling the space like an invisible presence. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. I looked at Emily. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't crying out in pain. Her lips were moving silently, as though she was mouthing words to someone or something that only she could see. I turned to Aaron, but his eyes were wide, filled with dread. I don't know what's happening," he said, his voice cracking. She keeps saying the name of our baby, and then the heart rate drops. I don't know what to do, Angie. I don't know if she's even here anymore." His words struck a chord deep within me, something primal, something that made my pulse race. Was Emily still present? Was she still in this room with us? Or had something taken over her, something I had no medical explanation for? The fetal heart tones dipped again, but this time, they didn't return to normal. The line on the monitor flattened. Silence. I could feel my heart in my throat. A cold sweat broke out along my spine. I grabbed for the Doppler again, trying to find a pulse, anything to prove that the baby was still alive. The sound of the baby's heartbeat was the one thing that anchored me to reality. I placed the Doppler against Emily's abdomen, pressing it harder, but the silence lingered. And then, in the stillness, I heard a voice, not Emily's, a soft guttural whisper that seemed to come from the farthest corner of the room. It was faint, like a whisper carried by the wind, but it was undeniable. "She's coming, Angie," Emily said, her voice eerily calm. "She's waiting." I pulled back, stunned. I looked at her face, at her eyes. They weren't focused on me anymore. They were looking at the corner of the room, as if the answer to everything lay there. A shiver ran down my spine. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It went from clinical to something far darker, something I couldn't explain. Before I could respond, the fetal heart rate spiked again. It wasn't gradual. It shot up suddenly, wildly, as if the baby's heart was racing against time, against something invisible in the room. The monitor screamed with its sharp, sudden beep, and I jumped, nearly dropping the Doppler in my hands. The noise was deafening, but Emily didn't flinch. She didn't react. She simply continued to whisper that strange name. It was then that I saw it, the unmistakable fear in Aaron's eyes. I had seen it before, in other parents, in other patients, but this was different. It wasn't just fear for his wife anymore, it was fear for his baby. Fear that, no matter what we did, we couldn't control this situation. This delivery, I moved to recheck the vitals, adjusting the 4, repositioning Emily, but the monitor's readings were still out of sync. The spikes, the dips, nothing was matching the contractions. Nothing was matching the clinical guidelines we all followed. The baby's heart rate was obeying Emily's whispers. Every time she spoke, the monitor would react. Every time she fell silent, the rhythm would stop. It felt like a nightmare. Like I was standing outside the realm of medicine, watching something unfold that no textbook could explain, no protocol could handle. Aaron's voice trembled as he asked again, "Angie, please, what's happening? What's wrong with her?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. What could I say? I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain the way the baby's heart was responding to something beyond us, to something unseen. Just as I was about to call for more help, the fetal heart rate flatlined once more. This time, there was no immediate spike, no recovery, just silence. I looked at Emily. She wasn't crying, she wasn't panicked, she wasn't even breathing hard from the labor. She was serene. Her lips moved again, mouthing that strange name, but this time, she spoke it out loud. "I'm here," she said softly, almost reverently. "She's waiting. She's waiting for you." I froze, my hands trembling as I held the monitor. I looked at the baby's heart rate. It was still flatlined. I had never seen anything like this in all my years of practice. And then, suddenly, the heart rate jumped. It wasn't gradual. It was immediate, a shock. The baby's heart was racing again, stronger than before. But the fear in Aaron's eyes was still there. "Angie, please," he begged. "Please, don't let her go." The words hung in the air like a prayer. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just labor anymore. This was something else. Something I couldn't understand. Something I couldn't control. The room was now a strange mix of tension and surreal calm. The clock on the wall ticked, but it felt out of sync with everything happening around me. The usual beeping of the fetal heart monitor, once a source of comfort, now felt like an omen, like the heartbeat of something far beyond the realm of medical science. I felt myself losing control. This wasn't just a labor. This wasn't just a mother in distress. It was something else entirely. My training, my years of experience, everything I had relied on up until now seemed utterly useless in this moment. I had no answers for Emily, no answers for Erin, no answers for the twisting feeling in my gut. I had never been trained for something like this. Emily's contractions grew stronger, but the baby's heart rate no longer matched them. It didn't respond to the typical rhythm of labor. Instead, it seemed to respond only to her voice, to her whispers. She wasn't crying out. She wasn't laboring in the typical way. She was listening, responding. Every time she spoke, the heart rate would spike. Every time she fell silent, the heart rate would drop. It was like the baby wasn't in the womb anymore, it was somewhere else. Something was controlling this rhythm, something that none of us could see. I leaned over the bed, trying to steady myself, trying to stay grounded. But every time I looked at Emily, her eyes weren't focused on me. They weren't focused on anything in the room. She was looking beyond us, looking past us, as though there was someone else in the room with us, someone we couldn't see. I glanced over at Aaron. He was shaking now, his hands gripping the edge of the bed. His face was pale, eyes wide, filled with terror. Angie, please, please, make it stop. Make her stop whispering, please. I can't take this anymore. His voice broke, and I saw something in him I had never seen before, helplessness. A helplessness so raw, so palpable, that it threatened to swallow us both. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to reassure him, but how could I reassure him when the very monitor I relied on to track the baby's heart rate seemed to be responding to something other than the contractions? How could I tell him that everything would be okay when I wasn't sure anymore? Then, it happened. The lights in the room flickered again, not in the way they usually do when the hospital's electrical system is overloaded. No, these lights flickered like someone was playing with the switches, like someone had just dimmed them deliberately. I turned to check the light switch, but I saw no one. The room, already heavy with tension, grew thicker. It felt oppressive, like the air itself was weighing us down. I turned back to Emily. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. She was still staring at the corner of the room. But this time, her lips weren't just moving silently. She was speaking in full sentences, and though I couldn't understand what she was saying, I could feel the words hanging in the air, charged with something I couldn't describe. Emily, I whispered, stepping closer to her. Who are you talking to? Her gaze flicked to me for a moment, but it was as though she didn't even see me. She just kept whispering. She says it's time, Emily said, her voice flat and calm. She's here. She's waiting for you. I tried to move closer, to touch her arm, to break her focus. But before I could, something strange happened. The baby's heart rate dropped again, and this time, it didn't spike back up immediately. The silence in the room deepened, a heavy silence that settled over us all, as though the very walls of the room had taken a collective breath. Aaron grabbed my arm, his grip tight and desperate. Angie, please, he begged again, his voice cracking. Please, what's happening to my wife? What's happening to my baby? What is all of this? I couldn't answer him. I couldn't answer any of the questions running through my head. I couldn't tell him that I was just as terrified as he was. The atmosphere in the room thickened even further. It felt as though time had slowed down. The clock on the wall ticked slower. The hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed muted, and the only sound I could focus on was Emily's whispering, that low, steady hum that I couldn't escape. The fetal heart rate monitor beeped again, but this time it wasn't the comforting beep I expected. It wasn't the steady rhythm that told me the baby was fine. No, this time it was a sharp, jagged bip like the machine itself was protesting. I glanced at the strip, and what I saw froze me in place. The heart rate was erratic, jumping from 100 to 160, back down to 40, and then spiking again. It didn't follow any rhythm. It didn't follow any medical pattern. I couldn't explain it. Angie, Emily's voice was calm, almost serene. She's waiting. She's ready. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. There was something in her voice that I couldn't ignore, something that was beyond human understanding. I had heard people speak of a mother's intuition before, but this was different. Emily wasn't just speaking for herself, she was speaking for something else, and whatever it wasn't of this world. I turned to Aaron, trying to hold on to the professional side of me. I'm going to call for a consult. I'm going to get backup, okay? But as I moved to hit the emergency button, the monitor beeped again, louder this time. I froze, my fingers hovering over the button. I couldn't press it. I couldn't bring myself to interrupt what was happening. It felt like I was about to cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. Emily's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of recognition in them. She says, "It's time," Emily whispered again. "She's coming. She's going to be born." Before I could say anything, the fetal heart rate dropped again. This time, it didn't come back. The silence in the room was deafening. The monitors were still flashing, beeping in a rhythm that no longer made sense. The baby's heart rate was gone, completely flatlined. The room had gone from tense to terrifying in an instant, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was beyond my control. I reached for the emergency call button, my hand trembling as it hovered above it, but I hesitated. The air around me seemed to grow colder. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Angie, what's happening?" Aaron's voice was desperate, filled with more fear than I'd ever heard from him. His hands were gripping the side of the bed, his knuckles white, his face pale. He looked at Emily, then back at me. "Please, make it stop. Please tell me she's going to be okay." I wanted to reassure him, to tell him everything was fine, but how could I? How could I tell him everything was fine when the baby's heart rate was gone, when Emily was speaking like she was talking to someone none of us could see? Her whispers had become louder now, more urgent, more forceful. "She's coming," Emily said, her voice low, almost reverent. "She's ready. She's going to be born." Aaron flinched. Who's ready? What are you talking about?" But Emily didn't answer him. She simply turned her head towards the corner of the room again. Her eyes locked onto that empty space, as though she could see something that wasn't there. She whispered the name again, the same name that had sent chills down my spine the first time I heard it. And then, something happened. The room, which had been so quiet, so heavy with tension, seemed to shift. The lights above flickered again, but this time, they didn't just flicker, they dimmed. They dimmed as if someone had turned them down, slowly, deliberately. The hum of the fluorescent lights became more pronounced, the buzzing more noticeable, like it was growing louder in the silence. I stood frozen, my eyes on Emily, my fingers still hovering over the call button. I was paralyzed. This wasn't a medical emergency, I could explain. This wasn't something I could fix. I had never felt so helpless, so out of control in my life. Suddenly, the fetal heart rate monitor screeched to life once more, but it wasn't the usual steady beep I was expecting. This was an erratic sound, sharp, almost like a distorted cry. It made my chest tighten, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The numbers on the screen flickered wildly, jumping from 140 to 180 to 62, 0 in the span of seconds, like it was being manipulated by something other than the baby's heartbeat. "Angie, please. What is happening? Please, make it stop," Aaron begged again. His eyes were wide with fear. He grabbed my arm, pulling me towards him. "Do something." I looked at the monitor, then at Emily. She was still whispering that name softly, rhythmically, as if she had no idea the monitor was beeping in a way that no medical explanation could cover, as if she wasn't aware of the chaos unfolding around her. I felt the room close in on me. The walls felt like they were pressing in. The weight of the air was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my hands shaking as I reached for the oxygen mask to place over Emily's face. I had to do something. I had to stabilize her, but as soon as I placed the mask over her nose and mouth, she gasped. It wasn't the typical gasp of a woman in labor. It wasn't the kind of breathing that came with pushing, with contractions. No, it was a breath as if she had been holding it in, waiting for something. "She doesn't like it when you interfere," Emily whispered, her voice steady, calm. Her eyes were still locked on the corner of the room. "She says the air doesn't belong to her." The words hit me like a blow. I froze, not knowing what to do next. The baby's heart rate had spiked again wildly, erratically, like it was in response to Emily's whisper. The monitor's alarm went off once more, blaring loudly in the sterile, quiet room. "She's coming," Emily said again, as if it was the only thing that mattered. "She's ready. She's going to be born." I could hear Aaron's panicked breathing beside me. What are we supposed to do? What's happening to her? But my mind was already somewhere else, somewhere that didn't make sense. I couldn't help but feel that Emily wasn't speaking to us. She was speaking to someone or something that we couldn't see. Something was dictating this birth. Something was pulling the strings. I stepped back, trying to steady my breath. "I'm going to call for more help," I said, my voice unsteady. "We need backup." But as soon as I reached for the call button again, the monitor flatlined again. The silence was deafening. Emily's lips moved once more. "She's here," she whispered, her eyes still staring at the corner. She's ready. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. The room was closing in on me, and all I could hear was Emily's voice, echoing in my ears, along with the constant beeping of the fetal heart monitor. And then just as suddenly as it had happened, the heart rate spiked again. This time, it was steady. It was strong. It was normal. The monitor beeped a steady rhythm, and the atmosphere in the room shifted again. But it wasn't a sense of relief. It wasn't a feeling of everything is fine, no, it was the opposite. It felt like we were witnessing something we had no right to witness. Something beyond our control. Something that had been waiting all along. The door to the room opened, and Dr. Patel entered, her expression unreadable. She glanced at the monitor, then at Emily, then at me. I could tell she was trying to make sense of what was happening, but like me, she couldn't. There were no words, there was no explanation. Dr. Patel looked at the strip, then back at me. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with an edge of concern. I shook my head. "I don't know, but something's wrong." And that was the truth. There was no explanation. There was no charting that could explain this case. I had no clinical answer. No medical reason for what was happening. I was witnessing something that no one in the medical field had ever trained me to handle. Emily whispered again, her voice soft, almost like a prayer. "She's ready. She's going to be born." And I knew, without a doubt, that whatever was happening in that room, whatever force had taken control of this delivery, had already decided the outcome. The rest of us were just witnesses, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were witnessing something we were never meant to see. If you found this story as unsettling as I did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced something that defies explanation? What do you think was really happening in that room? Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, some things are better left unexplained. Like, comment, and subscribe for more unsettling true stories and eerie experiences.